So let's dive right in. So one thing, there's been some conversation about how to cope and how to deal with these things. The first thing I was hoping you guys can tackle a little bit is when the coping things sort of go wrong and there's conflict at home and there's nowhere to go. You're stuck at home, right? There's just isolation. So maybe Makar, if you can start us off with this question of when, of course, God forbid, there's ever any conflict in a marriage, but if there is one in a marriage and now you're stuck at home and you're isolated, what do you do? How do you handle fights, conflict, arguments in prison?
Yeah, yeah. And when we were busy, sometimes we used our busyness to escape the issues, right? Because you can come home late and you don't have to have the conversations. And now like you're facing each other and you can't get out of each other's faces, right? A lot of times you're with each other for so many hours. So it's definitely a lot of conflict comes up, and also the fact that everyone is stressed. Everyone is more stressed, and everyone's like balance is off, which is another thing of stress. Like it's already stressful, and then your balance is off, so there's more stress, right? And then now you're in front of each other's faces so much more, so it's even harder. So it's all really hard, right? But what ends up happening is the other thing you're being confronted with, and that we're all confronted with, is whether or not we ever had good conflict resolution, conflict management skills, And that's the real confrontation, because that's the thing you take with you for the rest of your life. So just some simple things is, one, I would say, slow down. Slow down. When there's conflict, slow down. Don't engage in this like rapid back and forth, right? Like when you're in a conflict. Respond and don't react. Like, it's kind of like, imagine yourself playing ping pong, right? And you're like in a good series like of like where it's like a lot of back and forth, like 10, 15, 20 times. It's kind of like a lot. So if that's happening, usually you're just kind of hitting what you were served, right? You're just reacting to the thing that you were served. But imagine all of a sudden you just say, you know what, I'm going to catch the ball with my hands, or I'm going to just not do anything with it, right? That's how you have to, that's what the difference between responding and reacting. Reacting is always just like, oh, he said this, like this, and people find themselves in this like back and forth in conflict. But you can't do that. You have to respond, don't react, don't engage in that rapid back and forth. Don't raise the volume of your voice. Like once the volume goes up, nothing is going to get solved. And that's like the simplest rule ever in life, right? Like once the volume goes up, nothing gets solved. That's it, right? So don't do that. Accept that you may need to pause the conversation and continue it later. That's just the reality, because sometimes you're too anxious and tense, and you're not in a position to receive any influence in life, in anything. So you need to slow down, listen to the other person's point of view, and do everything you possibly can to better understand it before you work hard to express your point of view. So like listen to the point of view, and then ask a question, try to understand it, and then try harder, and then try to express your point of view, So that's something we can try. Admit your wrongs. Most likely both sides contribute to a problem. Like in almost every problem, whenever a couple comes in or there's a family problem, most of the time both sides contribute to it. And it's good to start with what you did wrong. Like saying like, hey, even if you're like 1% of the contribution, the other person 99%, a lot of times it helps if you just say, hey, this is really tough. I do want to acknowledge though that like I should have been a bit more respectful in what I was saying. I just want to say that, and I'm sorry for that. Usually that helps to really diffuse a very significant amount of the tension. And just 3 more quick things. Avoid using extreme words like never or always, like you always do this, or you never this. Like don't ever say that. Like I could do that now. Don't ever say that.
Never.
But yeah, never say that, because it's not going to help. And then also never sin. Never sin. Right? Like don't curse the other person, don't disrespect them, don't hit, all that stuff. Like that's just, like you're never going to go anywhere in life, in family life, if you're doing that stuff. It's just over. And don't be passive aggressive. Like sometimes, fine, I'm not going to like curse at the person, but I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to give them the silent treatment, right? That's an aggressive way. That's aggressive to withdraw from someone because they're like, wait, I want to talk, and or something, right? And you don't even talk to them at all. That's aggressive, but it's passive aggressive, right? So just be careful about that.
Hmm. I love that, Makar. Thank you so much for sharing those things. Because one thing that I've sort of seen as well, like for patients who have been discussing this topic with me recently, is the reality that in the past when we were super stressed out, we can probably take that anger or distress on other people because there's other people in our lives. Right now, if you're cooped up inside, there's only one target. That target is most likely going to be your family or your spouse. So these have been really, really helpful tips, I think, to navigate that, that conversation. And I want to maybe similar get some thoughts from you, Christine, in terms of, if that conflict is with not just our spouse, but maybe even our kids, when we want to use this time to have like a better way to communicate, because right now we're stuck. We used to be able to just, like Makar's saying, we're super busy. We can just text our spouse and that's the end of it. That's the end of it. But now we're sort of face to face. So how do we use this time to grow and to be able to actually speak to each other? What a concept.
Yeah, I think we're in a very emotionally charged kind of environment when we're all in there together and don't have anywhere to escape. So knowing where your buttons are really important so that if somebody starts to push those, you're realizing that it's an emotionally charged environment and you're not just going to explode. But you're going to try to listen, like Makar said, try to listen to what the other person is saying, have some empathy, put yourself in their shoes a little bit. So it's not just all about me, me, me. And also know when it is time to take a break. It doesn't mean that you're not going to come back to it later, that you're going to just shelf this forever. You just maybe need to shelve it for a little bit and say, tomorrow at 9 o'clock, let's sit down and talk about this with a clearer head. And also don't bring in arguments from 5 years ago or 2 months ago or something like that. Talk about the topic that's at hand, address that fully, problem solve together, have a common goal to get through together. And then from there, you can, start to problem solve a little bit. So you're on the same page and seeing it from the same perspective. And you're not just pulling things from long ago. Do you remember when you did this 5 years ago? Because that's just going to make somebody defensive. And it's going to really hurt because they may not remember it, or they may not have the same memory as you do of the situation. So just try to solve the problem that's at hand. And then maybe you can list 2 or 3 things that you're going to work on and then come up with more problems as you solve those. And don't let things accumulate, because as you let it accumulate, then things build on top of each other. So
I love that. I love that. And I love also something that you're saying here in terms of keeping things in perspective, in terms of, when we're in conflict, when we're arguing with each other, sometimes it can feel like, sort of the analogy that we're saying here too with ping pong is that we're sort of against each other, as opposed to saying that the conflict is the problem and we're on the same team, right? Keeping perspective of teams, like whose team is who. And that way I'm less concerned about maybe winning the argument, maybe more concerned about winning the person. Because again, you're depleted in terms of resources here, in terms of who can back you up. If you lose the person you're living with, that might just be it, and you're stuck in the closet for the rest of this quarantine, which is not going to be pretty. But something that you guys both said, and I'm curious to get your take on, is some people have told me, you know what, okay, maybe I take that verse in, Psalm, I think 4, where it says, be angry and do not sin, and I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to say, all right, time out, and I'll get back to you tomorrow. It can feel like I'm a little overwhelmed being around people all the time in our enclosed environment at home, and I want to take a break, but I feel guilty. I feel like guilty for having this space or taking this break. Makar, can you speak to that a little bit in terms of, is it okay to take a break? What should that break look like? Should I feel guilty about it? Like, is it weird that I'm not there for people around me?
Yeah. Actually, you shouldn't feel guilty about that. And, your individuality is very, very important. Your individuality, our individuality is very important. And actually, the Bible speaks about that so much. Just 2 simple examples. In Matthew 10, verse 30, it says, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Like, just to show you how God cares about you very personally, right? Like very, very personally, like you, not you like the group, but you the single person, like not just you the single person, but the hairs on your head, right? So also in Psalm 139, the whole psalm was so beautiful. All the psalms are beautiful. It says, "Oh Lord, you have searched to me and known me," right? Like it's such a personal thing, and so your you-ness, ness, your you-ness, your individuality is extremely important. And you need time with yourself, even if you're an extrovert. Like, we have this like very overly simplified understanding that like extroverts are like, they just don't stop talking. They're always around people, da, 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 right? But even extroverts need time for themselves, right? You need time to be alone. You need time to think and to pray. You know what's so interesting? That Jesus set a physical boundary many times, right? To go alone and pray. And actually, there's a very nice verse. I think all of us know when Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane and he went to pray, right? And he took Peter, James, and John with him. This is at least in two Gospels. I didn't research this, but in the account in Matthew, it says, then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there, right? That's exactly what it says, right? It says, sit here while I go pray over there, right? And that was it, right? So we need time alone, and you shouldn't feel guilty about wanting that time, right? You likely even need more time alone if your home environment isn't exactly helpful. And that's really, really important, right? Because, and sometimes the unhelpfulness or the dysfunction in our homes or the difficulty in our homes, part of it can be expressed as making us feel guilty for wanting to be alone, right? So spend time alone thinking, spend some of your waking time alone on purpose, like on purpose. Do it on purpose, right? And tell your family that you need some time alone to pray or to rest if they're like, because some families are really like enmeshed and they just kind of, they're really clingy, right? So you have to be ready for that, right? And find ways to start to set those boundaries and be like, hey, I actually just want to spend some time alone to pray and maybe take a nap or something, right? And instead of just only praying and taking a nap, just maybe spend like another 5 minutes, like just thinking about your life and just taking some time to yourself. And lastly, it may help actually if you see there's a need and an opportunity to give your family members time alone for them first, right? So you can tell them, hey, like, I feel like you're just always taking care of this and that. What if I take care of this and you can spend some time alone? And maybe like later on, I can do that later, or just don't even ask that part. But later on, after you did that, you can just ask for the time alone and they might be more likely to give it to you without complaining.
I love that, man. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. We really do need this time alone. And I think there's a beautiful verse that I remember when Christ said, come away with me and rest for a while, and there's this invitation that we have maybe in isolation, maybe in quarantine, maybe even a little bit of Lent. I think Lent is going on in the background somewhere too. Like this is still a thing, like it's still on. They didn't cancel it. And we can have this opportunity to come away a little bit in silence and quietness with Jesus and in him in that time. I read a nice quote recently that said, even in therapy, the part of the work of therapy is to introduce the person to themselves. And in that quietness, maybe we can ask the Lord, like the Psalms are saying, search us, O Lord, and know our anxieties and find out kind of what's going on deep inside here. This is a chance where things are a little quiet and God can search us out. But what about, let's kind of flip it for a second. Let's say I'm doing I listened to the Mena podcast thingy or whatever this is, the Zoom thing, and I heard Makar say be in a time of quiet, and I'm quiet and I have some time, and now I overdo it. And now I'm just bored in the house and I'm in the house bored, okay, as the TikTokers say. Christine, as a family, like how do we prevent, like I've had some people ask me, like my kids are so bored, they're going to throw things at me all day, but they don't know what to do. They're used to just running around in school and taking all their energy out and terrorizing their teachers, but now they just terrorize me and they're so bored at home. What do I do?
So again, humans are very adaptable. So initially we may have been thrown this curveball and we're like, what do we do with this time? But now we're about 3 weeks in, almost a month in. Hopefully that has shifted a little bit. And the focus really needs to be on our strengths. And everybody has their own unique kind of constellation of strengths that we have to focus on. So we have to focus on the things that we are in control of and not the things that we're not in control of, and not try to control all the stuff that's happening in the outside world that we don't have any control of. What we can control is ourselves. And I've often given children clients like sheets of things that this is what I can control versus the things that I can't control. So optimizing focus on my strength is definitely something that I can do so that this doesn't become monotonous. focus on what is stressing us, maybe journal a little bit. Lots of people write things that they're grateful for. Journaling about gratitude is really helpful and can help you become resilient. And we have to also, even though we're kind of in this quarantine phase with just our immediate family members, it doesn't mean we have to, we're physically distancing, but we shouldn't socially isolate. So maybe FaceTime grandma, or FaceTime a neighbor, or FaceTime a friend. And so that way you're still connected with people in the outside world, even if you can't go really visit them. And again, as a family unit, we want to try to focus on what we're going to problem solve or what we're going to work on today, maybe create for ourselves a schedule that we can follow, so that there could be some time for like schoolwork, some time for reading, some time for playing games, activities around the house. And so we want to savor these moments too, and not just look at them as I'm just stuck in these four walls and I can't do anything. We can still go outdoors as long as we're kind of physically distancing from other people. So maybe walking around your neighborhood or walking around the park, getting some sunshine is really helpful. But just as long as you're creating kind of a schedule, I think that'll help so that it doesn't become monotonous and boring, and you're not doing the same things over and over again. And you're also trying to find meaningful things to do throughout your day as well, so it doesn't become boring. So you're aware of your own emotions, you're journaling a little bit, you're discovering some new talent. Thankfully, we have all this technology that we can rely on and learn some new things. So it doesn't have to become boring or monotonous. We can do new things throughout this process.
I love it. Both with the creativity, we can sort of beat this this monotony, because it is super boring.
Right.
But the one thing though, and a question sort of came in now, it sort of speaks to what you're saying, and I'd love to hear you as well as Makar comment on it, is everything that you're saying sounds like it's so much better than what we're currently doing. Like it's so effective and things that like will actually work. But for some reason, I don't know if anybody else on this Zoom thing is doing this. Our default is just binge Netflix. And it's not like we didn't, like maybe we YouTube this and like somebody gave me some good advice, but reality is I'm just on my TV all day and on my phone all day. So even though we're hearing some good advice, how do we overcome the like reflex to just attach our TV to our foreheads, and actually implement some of the things that you're talking about, and as well as what Makar is saying. So if you want to share with that for a second, as well as maybe.
So maybe asking yourself simple questions like, what have I always wanted to do if I had more time and I just haven't done it? Maybe I can research that some more and figure out how to do it. What am I learning about myself at this time? Maybe I don't like the silence and I'm watching the TV to kind of escape from the reality of who I am, and that maybe I don't like what I'm seeing. So what goals can I have both in this time frame and also for after this quarantine is over, so that when I resume life, I'm still being productive, I'm still doing things that are meaningful. What things that have been challenging in the past that I've enjoyed? Can I do some of that modified a little bit in quarantine while I'm indoors? And just again, seeing what are the things that I'm valuing the most? Where are my strong points? We all have strengths. We don't tend to look at them very often. And so if we look at our strengths a little bit more, then we can apply that to adapting to this new lifestyle. But I would definitely start with questions like, what is something I've always wanted to do that I haven't done? What's a book that I wanted to read that I didn't have time for? And so that I'm not just, like you're saying, going to Netflix and sitting and watching TV all day, but still trying to learn and still trying to be productive, but modified.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah. And let me say, I want to say some more complicated, like something more complicated than the thing I'm about to say now, which is avoid your bed. Like just don't get in your bed until you need to sleep. That's good sleep hygiene anyway, but that's a separate point. Like just stay out of your bed unless you're sleeping or like about to getting ready to sleep. But just some other things that are a bit more complicated than avoiding your bed is that like if you are not making, like after this period, you don't want this period to be just as if you were dead during this period, right? Like if I was dead, if I complete this period of the coronavirus, social distancing, right? Like, and my life hasn't moved in any way. Like, what's the difference between that and like just not living, right? And so we have to, not allow this period to make us pause on everything in my life, right? Because I still have a life to live after this. And I don't want to look back and be saying like, hey, I wish I did this or that. I could have read that when I was, in social distancing and isolation or whatever. The two questions that I found are very helpful during this time, or really it's in life, is whenever you're about to do something, anything, but especially during this time, ask yourself two questions, which is, what is the incremental benefit or good that I'm going to get from what I'm about to do? That's the first question. The second question, which is also very, very important, is what am I giving up or not doing by doing what I'm about to do, right? So, and those two questions are extremely important, right? So again, what is the incremental benefit? Like, what's the benefit I'm going to get by doing this next thing, right? And also, what am I giving up? Like, that's the opportunity cost, right? Which is, what am I not doing by choosing to do this because I can only do one thing at a time? And those two questions are actually important for your whole entire life, because the older and older you get, the more you realize how precious time is, right? Time is like the most precious thing, like one of the most precious things that God has given you. And I always hear from parents, when their kids, go from like, 2 months old to 4 months old to 6 months old, they're actually like grieving that they're never going to get like their younger child back, they're like, and now, I see little children starting to talk. I am never going to see them not being able to talk again, most likely, right? Like, so that period when they were just this kid and we were doing goo goo gaga, whatever, right? It's never going to happen again, right? So time is a very precious thing, right? And we have to guard it. And by asking those two questions, I think we will like be very careful, because we have a responsibility to be good stewards of this resource of time.
I love that. And then one thing I guess I'm hearing from what both of you guys are saying is that there are sort of at least two different approaches that we can take this whole quarantine thing. One is a very passive one, which is just pacify yourself, put the pacifier in of Netflix or of Disney Plus, and then once you're done with one, to restart the other one. And once you're done with Tiger King, go on to the next show, right? Or there's a real active one. There's a real active one that you guys are saying, if we like pause for a second here and are really mindful, like when scripture tells us, like really consider your ways, right? Or walk circumspectly, like walk as if you know what's happening around you, that you're not just being comatose, like what Makar is saying. Is that even though sometimes, to be honest, that's the temptation, is like, how do I just like sleep for 2 months, maybe come back, like wake me up in July, right? Because I'm going to be, and then miss the whole opportunity with where we are here. And
Mena, can I add one more thing?
yes,
I was talking to another group about this, because this question that Christine answered and you're talking about now it's such a common question right now, and it's really important. We were talking about the fact that like when you're on Facebook, right? Did you guys know when you're on your like feed and you're just like scrolling, and then you watch a video, and then when the video is done, like it like does that thing, and then the next video comes up, right? Like there are like people whose job it is to develop calculations and formulas and algorithms, like that's what they are, to find what is the best next video to show you to keep you looking at the screen, right? So you should know that there are like, these people aren't evil, right? They have a job, right? But there are forces in the world, right, that are trying to consume that resource that you have, right? By the way, when you start making a lot of money, or if you're making a lot of money right now, their financial advisors come and they want to talk to you to take a piece of that, right? They're not evil, right? But once you have a resource, everyone is trying to take it. You have to like guard it, right? Guard your time. Don't give a minute to anybody until you know why you're giving it, right? What's the incremental benefit? What am I giving up, right? So I just want to say that like there's it's not just that you're not doing good things, is that there's forces working against you too, right? Yeah.
That's such a good point. And even though right now it feels like, with the money analogy, it feels like time-wise, we got all the time in the world. We got 24 hours a day to do nothing, right? So, but that's not really the reality, right? That we have to be stewards of this time. And that takes me to sort of something I wanted Christine to comment on is, when we're looking at our time and we want to be good stewards of it, and we want to figure out what skills or tools do I need to actually balance this, right? To balance my like scrolling through Facebook time, of course, scheduled 8 hours a day. And then every now and then I can probably throw in some actual work too. how do I balance and kind of maintain things that I'm supposed to do, things that I like to do, that kind of stuff? What are some tools I can think about?
So, the ability to balance is really important for wellness. And the research is showing that when we don't balance, that's when we have a real threat to our wellness. And so we have to learn to kind of self regulate. Self control is really important. I think Lent time is really good for that because we are learning a lot of self control through Lent. Um, and we have to balance several areas in our life. So look at the areas of your life that are kind of out of balance. So there's really 8 areas that we can focus on balancing. Our social areas, which are now even more important because we're doing it through social distancing. But social is really important. We need to have connection to other people. Our spiritual lives, how is our spiritual lives doing? And now again, through Lent, this is something that's really important that we have to balance. We have to look at things like financial, environmental, emotional, intellectual, our physical life, and our occupational life. So, which ones of these are taking a lot of our time? And we have to be even more mindful of that during quarantine when we usually have a very strict routine. We go to work, we go to school, we go do these things. This is when we eat dinner. It's very structured. But now that we have all this time, we have to be even more mindful about how we're balancing these things so that one does not fall out of balance and all we're doing, like Mena said earlier, is sit in front of the television and hour after hour after hour passes by. It was 9 a.m. and now it's 9 p.m. and all I've done is watch TV all day. So how am I being very mindful and structured in balancing those 8 areas? What areas are out of balance for you? Why is that area out of balance for you? What are you kind of walking away from or not paying attention to? And then when you notice which areas are out of balance, then you need to prioritize and say, this is the most important thing that I need to do for myself, and create yourself a schedule so that you are more structured. If you're feeling overwhelmed, some people are learning a bunch of new roles and trying to manage different roles in this time with their families. Maybe even roles that you're used to doing are kind of upside down. Somebody's doing something that they're not used to. One person used to cook, now the other person is cooking. Maybe one person's taken on more work from home. So you need to delegate responsibilities a little bit better as well. And if you're not a person who can multitask, then really pay attention to finishing one task before you start another so you don't become overwhelmed in this time as well. But the key is balancing those kind of 8 areas and not neglecting one over the other. And if you are neglecting one over the other, kind of asking yourself why you're doing that and figure out a way to return to that balance. Because again, the key to kind of restoring our wellness is to balance those 8 areas.
That's really great. It sounds like it's, I mean, when we're able to take a systematic approach to sort of understand the dimensions of our life and what's out of whack and not out of whack. And I think one thing that sometimes helps too is, one of the benefits of having a spouse or having a relationship with others is sometimes we may or may not be in tune or aware of those 8 areas. But believe me, the people around you are very much aware. Hey, the physical is a little out of balance. The kirsch has really grown. Maybe like take a walk around the block a little bit or something, right? I'm not saying I've heard that before. I'm just saying it's might be
And
possible.
if you have more than one person working from home now, kids are out of school, they're working from home, the spouses are working from home, create different workspaces too, so that you're not
Mm,
being distracted by other people, and you have set times for work and then set times for family time. It's not all blending together and being confusing.
that's a very good point because right now it seems like all the days are merging
All blended
into
together.
others, right? Like, oh, what are you doing next week? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the same thing I'm doing every day, Pinky. Um, 90s joke. Um, so let's say you're doing these things, but again, like the flip side of it is that you find, Makar, that the person maybe that you care about, whether it's your spouse or your sibling or someone that lives at home, their life is totally imbalanced, right? That the social distancing is really hitting them hard. They're not just playing Xbox like the rest of us, like they're really struggling. What do you do? How do you help them out if it feels like it's really hitting them much harder than it otherwise?
Yeah, yeah. And we all might have, like, we're all home with people, many of us are, and we might be seeing that this is really affecting someone in just like a much deeper way than it's affecting everyone else. And I think it's important, first of all, to just kind of check your own anxiety levels first, because sometimes we can kind of like transfer an emotion onto a situation, and we just need to be a little careful about that. So, what I would like to say is try to observe changes in behavior and mood, like specific ones, like be specific. Try to see like how is their behavior changing how is their mood changing? Because when you start to actually think about that and you start to like articulate those things even in your own mind, you can be a bit more objective. And also the next thing, which is you have something to take to someone else who can help, right? Because sometimes you get a phone call and the person is just like, oh, I'm so worried about this and this. I'm so
Right.
worried. I'm so
Right.
worried. I'm so worried, right? And then you're like, okay, so like what's actually happening? And they're just so worried, right? So so you want to be able to communicate, to call someone for help and say, actually, I'm this is what I'm feeling, but what I've observed is this, right? I've observed these behaviors. I've observed these, what I think are these mood changes, because it really helps when you're calling someone to share your observations. If you can, and this is now really important, this all depends now, what I'm about to say, it all depends on two words, which are trust and rapport, right? Trust and rapport, what I'm about to say, okay? So like some families, they just can't do what I'm about to say. They just can't do it. They're always in conflict. They don't nobody trust anybody. Everybody's fighting all the time, right? I hope that's not any of us. But trust and rapport are very important. If you can, this is what two things you can do. And I suggest I'm offering that you do this in 2 steps, okay? First, if you can, gently ask this member of your family if you can speak with them, and ask him or her if everything is okay. Just say, hey, is everything okay? And then if they say, yeah, everything is fine, you can just say, okay, I just want you to know that I'm here anytime you want to talk, right? That's it. I know it's very hard to do something else. We want to just like dive right in and start opening up and forcing them to tell us stuff. But the first thing is just show I'm here. I'm here. Like I'm here. There's someone here for you. Okay. Then do this again later on. Then try it again, but later on, like maybe a day or 2 later, if depending on what's going on. And then if they say, yeah, I'm okay, then tell them, and say it gently, right? And don't assume that there's something going on. You can say, I think I might be concerned about something that's going on with you. And like, this is like, especially during this time, I know it's very difficult for all of us, right? But don't assume that something's wrong. Just say, hey, I think I'm concerned about you right now. I just want to make sure you're okay. And you can say, it might be just me, but I'm just noticing that you are, and you can list some of your observations, right? But again, the key thing here is trust and rapport. But now we actually all have a responsibility towards each other, right? Because people can't reach their friends as easily, people can't reach help as easily. I do want to say, very important, as hopefully any mental health person would say, if you're concerned about your family member harming themselves, please speak to a professional. You should speak to a professional immediately, right? If you're concerned about them harming themselves immediately, then you should call 911, right? So if you're just like kind of concerned, right, and you're not sure, as soon as you possibly can, immediately you call a mental health professional or like get help for yourself, like get some guidance, right? But if they're like, you're not sure what they're gonna do in 1 minute, right? Call 911, right? And better safe than sorry, right? Like, fine, the police came, you made a big mess, everything was whatever, right? But the alternative is so bad, right? And every once in a while this happens, and it's really scary.
Well, thank you so much, Makar. And I just want to piggyback on that for a second, because I'd be remiss if we didn't comment on that for a quick moment. Like, once you begin to build that trust and rapport, sometimes people ask, how do I know? Like, what are some things to look out for? I just want to give you 5 quick things that we've sometimes talked about in our last Mena panel as well, of the 5 Ds of distress. Makar touched on the first one there, is if there's danger. If you're noticing danger, that's a big red flag. Another one in the D's of distress, kind of red flags, is if you're seeing that there's a duty problem, so danger or duty, meaning the person's feelings or experiences are beginning to impact schoolwork, work, relationships. This is a red flag, and maybe you want to think about, hey, maybe I should try to get this person help. Another one is duration, or how long has it been going on? Maybe they just had a really tough day, then that's okay. But it's been going on for a while, weeks, months. One statistic that we shared in the panel it's really frightening to me and disheartening, is oftentimes it takes, on average, 11 years between the person first develops symptoms and is finally connected to care. We never want it to be the case. So if there's duration of a very long time, big red flag. Another one is daily, meaning how frequently is this thing going on? If it's something that's happening one day yes, one day no, then maybe it's less of a red flag. But if it's a daily kind of consistent, persistent situation, red flag for us to think about as well. And then lastly is depth. Something like anxiety, for example, we may have, and we're a little bit anxious because we're in this beautiful panel and we got Zoom bombers maybe hopping in, or maybe we can be so anxious that we have a panic attack and we can't function. The depth of it is so deep and so debilitating that it's a big red flag. Okay, so I want you to just remember 5 Ds of despair: danger, duty, daily, depth, and duration. Okay,
Yeah.
so if that happens, one other quick plug that I'll just share with you. At Mena, we've also developed a tool for you that you can go on our website, and under programs of mental health, for free, you can speak with someone who can help you connect with a therapist if you need to. We've developed also a list of therapists, depending on what state you're in, that we can connect you with, people who can work with you to make sure that you get the help that you need. If it's not something that's like in the moment, like Makar is saying, you got to call 911 right now. But for a lot of us, we may have questions of like, what does it look like to go to therapy? How do I navigate my insurance? So shameless plug on my end is that there is a Mena resource that a wonderful group of servants have put together for your benefit here. Now I want to ask Christine a question that just sort of came in now, and that has to do with sort of the two sides of trauma and resilience. I want you to kind of close at the end maybe with some big tools of growth and resilience. But before we do that, there's a very real question that just came in here of grief and trauma, right? The reality is right now, one person asked, like, we lost a loved one, right? How do I deal with that, right? Like I'm going through a list of patients in the hospital of families that have lost a loved one, and I have to speak with families. What do we do with that? How do we begin to tackle grief? Because there's real death going on in this pandemic, not just boredom.
Mhm. First of all, I'm sorry for your loss. It's a challenging time, I'm sure, for us as a country and a world. But when it's personal and it hits home, it's even more difficult and much more real. So first of all, I'm very sorry for your loss. Grief is an interesting concept because it changes who we are, and it's something that kind of evolves with time. Right now, you're in a shock phase. You're in maybe a denial phase. You can't believe that this is happening, and it's especially difficult when you can't see a loved one and it happens so suddenly because of something like this. So that takes its own toll. Um, but just know that it does evolve with time. It probably changes who you are, but it doesn't mean that you can't continue to function beyond this and be a meaningful person. First of all, we don't want to, again, isolate. We want to find support, whether it's from church, whether it's from friends, from family, from somebody, and not to take this loss on your own and take it alone. And know that kind of, again, the whole world is suffering, but maybe not in the same feelings that you're feeling. And so kind of taking it day by day, sometimes even moment by moment, maybe second by second, and not being in that sense of despair, but knowing that grief evolves, and you're going to feel a lot of probably different things. You may feel anger, you may feel sadness, you may feel all kinds of things, which are just your feelings right now, and they're valid and they're important. And we're not striving for perfection by any means right now. We're just striving for a little bit of balance and just going through whatever emotions you're feeling, and then connecting to a therapist to help you with this long term. It's really important to, just find that support initially. That's the main thing, because with grief, there's going to be a lot of different emotions that you're going to go through, and to have somebody to help you kind of navigate those emotions is really, really important. But in the interim, knowing that going through a range of emotions is normal, and that you're not expected to, become this productive person all of a sudden. You're going to go through these emotions, especially when it's something sudden, but to find somebody who can kind of guide you through it. In terms of being resilient in general, resilience is a muscle that we can grow. It's not something that develops overnight. It's not something that is expected, especially after a loss or especially after something that's so difficult. But trauma is kind of the same side of the same coin as resilience. So you can't have resilience really without trauma, but it's a muscle to be built throughout your life. And ways to kind of build that is to have positive emotions in your life, because that has been shown in research to expand your ability to problem solve. even when things are difficult in our church, we have the Thanksgiving prayer in all conditions, in all situations, because even when things are difficult, God is still with us. And so finding even the small things that you're gracious for and thankful for um, is really important for resilience. We want to be supportive of other people. And if we've made it through to the adulthood, which we're all in right now, we've been through some situation in our life that has made us resilient up until this point. So maybe looking back at your own life and seeing where you've had points of difficulty and how you've kind of left those points of difficulty or become stronger, what has helped you through those challenges, that's something you can use as tools for your own personal story that you're going through right now. Again, we all have strengths. Sometimes when we're going through a difficult time, those can get buried a little bit. So it's really important to kind of figure out what our strengths are and how to use them. And there's psychological tools that can help you figure out what your strengths are if you're interested in that. Also, like I said, social support is really, really important. Knowing that somewhere inside of you have coping skills, and if you need help with a therapist to help you kind of pull those out, that's really important as well. You have to have good physical well-being as well. So you need to eat right. You need to sleep enough, not too much, not too little, not eat the right amounts, eat the healthier foods, exercise, find some time to get outside and get some sunshine, and find a way to adjust our attitude. Attitude is really important. And no matter what situation we are in, we can't control everything. We can't control some things, but we can certainly control our attitude and control our ability to think positively in certain situations and to think, tomorrow can be a better day, or the next hour can be a better day. And like I said, sometimes you just need to think, let me get through this moment, let me get through this day, and not to think too far ahead. And again, it's not about perfection, but about balance. It's about knowing that it's okay to have feelings if you're grieving or if you're going through a difficult time, but that you can overcome it as well, especially with some help and some support.
Thank you so much, Christine. I think that's really solid. And I think one other element that really helps me when I think about this topic is a distinction, in our faith that sometimes it's a big contrast, I think, to other perspectives about who God is that we believe that God suffered in the flesh, right? We believe that Christ grieved, right? There was a moment of him like crying over a loss of a friend. There are moments of him despairing even of like life itself, like being, his heart is troubled and his soul is troubled even unto death, the scripture says. So one of the amazing things that Christ did is that he transferred this idea of like, we're alone in our pain, in our loss, in our brokenness, in like losing someone that we love and grieving alone, to him coming and grieving with us and really transforming like what this grieving process can be, is that he's grieving like right alongside us as we put into place like these really critical things that you're sharing with us. So thank you for sharing those things. And one of the things that you said that I want to flag as well is, understanding kind of this moment and kind of how the next moment can be, like that this is not going to last forever. And I wanted Makar maybe to share with us a little bit of, when you think about not being stuck in a moment, like there's a famous U2 song called Stuck in a Moment, and I always think about it of like sometimes this can sort of feel like it's freezing our life, whether it's the loss, whether someone lost a loved one and that froze an element of like what they thought life was going to be like and their development and their plans and their goals. Or maybe it's not loss, maybe it's not grief, but it's just this whole situation. It feels like I was going to do this and my life was going to be like this and I had these plans and I was going to be and I was going to do, and now my life is on pause and I'm stuck in this moment. How do I not get stuck in this moment?
Yeah. And I think also that, like, I want to say it's okay for there to be some time needed to just kind of embrace the new reality. Like things are changing, and we're not like machines that you can just like put in a new scenario and it immediately adjusts to the scenario on it. Like there's so much emotion associated with our present life. If you change our present life to a different way of living, our emotions they kind of move a little slower. They adjust a little slower, right? So you have to give at least like a few days, right? We even say like to build new habits takes like tens and tens of days, right? So because it's hard, changing is hard, and that's when you want to change. But how about when you don't want to change? That's even harder, right? So it takes a few days, and please don't listen to anybody who's invalidating your emotional experience. Full stop, right? Like, don't listen to anybody. Like, if you're grieving, if you're having a hard time changing, and somebody's telling you, yeah, bro, come on, keep going, blah, blah, don't even talk to that person for a while. Talk to a healthy person, okay? So just be careful about that, because not everybody's advice is, everybody has advice, but not all advice is good. Everybody has advice, especially Egyptians. Egyptians have so much advice. So, so if I feel like I'm falling behind, like my life plan is destroyed or what I was planning to do, believe me, like a lot of things I was planning to do these few months, I'm so sad that I can't do them. I'm sharing my personal experience. Like, there's a lot of things I was planning to do, I just can't do them. And things that I was really looking forward to are like things got canceled, things got postponed. Like, I'm like, it's hard. It's really hard, you know. And some of these things I was really, really looking forward to. First, realize that what is happening to you is happening to the whole world. That's the first thing, right? Like, hey, this really, really stinks. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I was supposed to finish my graduate program next month. Actually, ain't nobody finishing no graduate program for a few months, right? So just like, you gotta like just think that what's happening to you is happening to everyone, okay? Everyone is being slowed down right now, like and is adjusting. The whole world is shifting its plan. Even tax filing dates have shifted. I don't even remember the last time that happened, right? So consider if you may have needed to revisit your plan anyway, right? Like, just think about that. Like, maybe, all right, fine, you know, I was so attached to this plan, maybe I needed to revisit this plan anyway, right? Like, this might be an opportunity. Remember that God's ability to make you successful hasn't changed one bit. And please, like, this is probably the most important lesson in this whole time. This whole thing hasn't affected God's ability to do anything, even like a twinkling, even a little bit. Like, has not even a little bit, not even 0.001%, nothing, right? So God's ability to make you successful, regardless of the circumstances, hasn't changed. And that maybe you're realizing that realization itself is one of the personal purposes for you during this time, that which is God is able. Also, good leaders are able to turn on a dime. Good leaders are able to turn on a dime. And maybe this is a time to exercise that muscle. It's very similar to what Christine was saying on exercising the muscle of resilience, right? It's the same kind of point, which is that what we see, like right now, if you ever pay attention to how leaders are operating during this time, you're going to learn a lot of things, right? Just a few weeks ago, I got an email from a really senior person in a very big organization. Actually, it was last week, saying, you know, sorry that it took me so long to send this, and started writing things about the coronavirus and what the organization is doing. And I'm like, what? Like, this has been going on for like 4 or 5 weeks now, at least. Like, why are you sending me this message now? Like, it would have been better for you to not send it at all and let all your like delegates send the messages that they already sent, right? Because you look really bad, right? So good leaders are able to turn on a dime. They're resilient, right? They're able to, and maybe this is a time that you can revisit your plan. You can turn on a dime, which means just turn in a very small place, like you're stuck, and you can shift your plan, right? And you can exercise that muscle. So if you spend this time saying, oh my gosh, my plan, instead of saying, whoa, hey, okay, I'm going to exercise this muscle. I'm going to do this. How well can I be at shifting my plan given the evolving circumstances? And last but not least, your life's success has to be rooted in your character and in your relationship with God, not in a plan that's written on a piece of paper, right? Your life success has to be rooted in your character and in your relationship with God, not in a plan that's written on a piece of paper, right? And believe me, right now, there are weddings being canceled, postponed. Like, imagine, like, my plan was to be married by, it's not my plan, but imagine someone is like, my plan was to be married by this time and all that, and do this and do that, and our honeymoon and this, and we just gotta like try as hard as we possibly can to turn on a dime and shift.
I like it, man. I think there's a term that's sometimes used in the literature of like cognitive flexibility and versus
Mhm.
rigidity, right? Like how rigid you are. And I remember reading a study about this of, predictive factors of PTSD, right? If you happen to be in one of those situations where you have this cognitive rigidity, meaning your mind is sort of made up onto how the world should look and how things should be forever and ever unto the ages of all ages, amen, you're really going to struggle when things are taken out of your control, because this is a situation where ain't nobody got no control over nothing, right? And it's just points us to the reality of we never had this control to begin with. And like Christina Makar are kind of pointing us to is now how can we get in this dance, right? How can we have this flexibility of knowing like where is God leading us to? There's a beautiful verse that just came to my mind of where the Lord was saying to St. Peter, like you when you were younger, you sort of went wherever you wanted, but at some point you're going to stretch out your hand and you'll be led by someone else. Like the Spirit will kind of lead you in a way that you're not planning and deciding and making everything sort of according to your own calculation, according to your own plan. But let's say there's another question that just came in here. Let's say that you're trying to be flexible with this and you want to plan ahead a little bit of like, hopefully we're not going to be in this prison forever, right? And that eventually we're going to get out. How do you kind of plan ahead for like back to normal life, whatever that normal will be? Like, how do I have a transition where, because I know I'm not going to wake up one day in June and be like, oh, now it's time to plan my wedding. Wedding's on. I'm going to go to the NBA game this morning and then go to the concert in the afternoon. It's going to be some transition. So how do I sort of manage the expectation and plan out the transition from like, and I'm sorry, I keep using the word jail and prison. It's just the way it feels into like supervised visits of normal life. How do I transition to that? Christine, maybe if you want to begin with that.
Again, you have to know where the meaningfulness part is for you. So planning in small bites, but also having that flexibility, because um, we aren't going to go back to normal life with a snap of a finger. I think it will be a transition. And so being flexible that it may not be exactly according to the plan that I set, but that it's good to have goals. And good to have a place to kind of walk towards, even if I'm not going to get there tomorrow or next week or next month. But just walking in the direction of where you would like to go, that's fine. But also being flexible, because it isn't going to be the snap of a finger, and things could very well be, several months before we go back to normal. Um, it's not going to go away in general, but we have an idea of where we would like to walk towards. That flexibility is really important. It's a key part of resilience. And again, controlling your own attitude is the only thing you probably have the ability to control when things like this happen and we have no control. And they tell us everything has to stop. And so you have to transition very quickly to a new lifestyle and to a new thing. But we have the capability of doing that if we are open-minded, if we're flexible, if we can mobilize resources for things that I don't know how to do, maybe doing more Zoom meetings or calling IT or calling other resources to help me. If I can't do it all myself, I can't do it all by myself. So mobilizing some resources around you, being flexible, controlling your own attitude, and having a plan, but knowing that that plan could change. And that's not just in coronavirus time, but in general, life could change and you need to adjust along with it. And so not being so rigid minded that it has to be a certain way.
Awesome. Makar, did you want to comment on that, or you want me to just pose the next question to you?
Yeah, I actually, I think the only thing is, like, you know, Christine made a really good point that like getting back to normal it's not going to happen like right away, right? It's going to be like most likely there's transitions back. And remember, any transition, by the way, is hard for anybody all the time. So we actually have like at least two stages coming up, right? Like we have the transition period back to normal, and then the transition to normal. And I also want to say that it's going to be a new normal. And now I want to say that I want it to be a better normal, right? I want the normal, what the ultimate normal, to be better than my normal pre-coronavirus. And that's the goal, right? And we should reflect and ask ourselves, like, was the normal that I just left, was that perfect? Like, was that awesome? Or was there something that could have been better? And I similar to the goals point that Christine made, I think also, in addition to goals, also to complement and to support the goals, I also think each of us should make commitments,
Mm.
right? As much as you possibly can, right? There are some things that we're discovering now about ourselves, about our lives, about our families, about God, about the church, about our community, that I think there's a lot to reflect on. And maybe we could iterate on some commitments, like just start to write them down and think about them. Like every day, just go and look at them and say, like, is this the best way I'm articulating this commitment? Is this really going to work for me? How can I make this work? Is this good for me? What's the benefit I'm going to get from it? The point is, like, start to think about how you're going to be. Like, I need to be something after this is all over. What is that going to look like, right? And what did I get from this whole time? Did I get nothing? You know? So start to begin, like, every day, or even just for now, maybe even tomorrow, spend 20 minutes or 15 minutes and write down 5 commitments. And then in a day or two, just review them. In a day or two, review them again. We're going to be here doing this for like at least a few more weeks. Just keep looking at them and then see, and hopefully you can be like, you know what, this is the person I'm going to be, you know, and I could even start some of this right now.
And start with baby steps too. Start with baby steps, knowing that they could be modified later.
Yeah. Flexibility.
Definitely. Yeah, small steps towards the bigger line. Yes. It reminds me of something that is a big, like, distortion sometimes in the way we view, like, in our faith and Christianity. Like right now, like you're saying, Makar, the contrast or the incorrect way of looking at this is like wanting so badly, so desperately to just get back to the way things were 2 months ago, right? Similar somehow, sometimes in faith, we think about, like, God created us like Adam and Eve. Like, we want to be so badly to where things were in, like, creation before the fall and whatever. And there's this beautiful, like, story that I remember reading in the church fathers talk about how, like, God does not intend to just restore things back to the way things were in the Garden of Eden. He's actually trying to make things better than that, right? There's a story where these 2 monks were talking, and one monk is saying, like, oh, what's a spiritual life like? What do I do? Like, I pray a little, I read a little, I do this and that. Like, what's really going to happen? Like, what's the most that can really happen, right? And the other one turns to him and says, if you wished, you can become all flame, and his hands become like a blaze, like from prayer. The point there that you guys are saying, and it really is hitting home for me, is that, like, the idea is that after this is over, you know, Christ would transform me and you to something different and better, as like a 2.0, you know, post-corona, right? Not just like, please let me get back to before.
And Mena, like, I just want to take that and apply it back to the grief point that Christine made, because Christine said something so important, that grief transforms you, right? It can, and it definitely won't feel like that in the beginning, but it can transform you into something better than you were, right? Because that's what God is able to do, right? Yes. And it definitely won't feel that way in the beginning at all. Like, definitely, it'll feel much worse. But it's definitely possible, and we see it, like, in people's grief journeys, that at the end of it, they're like, oh my goodness, like, the things I learned about God and about life itself in that grief experience have transformed me into something better by God's grace, you know?
Definitely. I want you both to comment on this one question that's here as well, is that sometimes, you know, we're giving this one side of the coin of, like, the growth beyond grief and the post-traumatic growth and how God can transform things to be anew, like being a new creation in him. But sometimes also, like, whether it's the grief in the moment, or maybe you didn't suffer grief, but you're just, like, bored, this stuff kind of knocks you down, and it feels like you get kind of defeated, right? And one person's asking, like, it feels like people around me, maybe, like, and they're listening to you guys and say, like, wow, like, these guys are, like, being introspective and planning their life, and they're going to, like, write a book by the time Corona's over. And I'm over here and I'm like, one person says, I just feel lazy. I feel like worthless. I feel like I'm just doing nothing. Another person is saying, like, it feels like other people are getting in this rhythm and, like, doing all kinds of stuff. And I don't know who they're watching getting into rhythm. I don't see anybody in the rhythm. But, like, it feels like other people are doing all kinds of stuff, and I'm just, like, this lazy person on my couch. And I feel defeated by the things around me. How do I not just get defeated and apply some of these things that we're saying, that we're talking about here?
I think the balance has to be between giving myself a break and having some hope. Transitioning by holding both of those things simultaneously. That this, if I step back, this isn't going to last forever. There have been viruses in the past that have put people out of commission for a year or two, but then we come back, we bounce back, society bounces back. We are all very resilient. Sometimes we have to dig in and look for that. But if you're not doing something today, that's okay. Give yourself a break, but try again a little baby step tomorrow or the day after, or make a small plan of something to do. Get up, get dressed, go outside, walk around your block for a little bit. It'll give you a change of scenery, a change of perspective. All it is kind of removing yourself from the immediate pressure that you're feeling and giving yourself a chance to say, it's okay, I'm going to give myself a break, but at the same time, I want to do some small baby steps to get myself out of this mood, because we don't want that mood to last a long time. Again, it's about duration. A couple hours here or there of feeling stressed or upset by the situation. We're all upset and stressed by the situation. Again, you're not alone. The whole world is kind of learning how to deal with this day to day and taking new precautions and doing new things. But it is really important to kind of hold both of those at the same time, not to put too much pressure on yourself, but not to get complacent either, and to try to get into a little bit of a rhythm to get out of the mood that you're in, and find things that are meaningful even around you to do. So.
Yeah, and it's a little hard to tell from the question if this is like a mood thing or if it's like potentially just like a lack of discipline in life. And and maybe just because Christine addressed the mood part of it, which is very important, and that's like you can't like if there's a mood issue or like a mental health question, or you're just like kind of feeling like I can't break free, you know, like I'm stuck. That's a different problem than, or a different challenge than a lack of discipline. And maybe let me address the lack of discipline point. And I can't like motivate you, whoever, like anyone. Like I can't go into your heart and like make you motivated to like grow. Yeah, that has to come from you and between you and God. And maybe, you know, maybe you're not gonna like, if, and I'm not, again, I'm not talking about like the mood part of it. I'm talking about the discipline part. And maybe you're not gonna do anything this whole time. And that will motivate you because you're gonna look back and be like, oh man, like I'm wasting my life, right? Like even on Saturdays, I wake up like so late, I do nothing, I eat, I'm overeating. I'm not achieving anything. I'm not doing well in school. I'm not like work is not going anywhere. You know, I'm in these on and off relationships, and like really my life isn't going anywhere. And maybe this is going to be the time that's going to motivate you. So I can't like make this the time that motivates you, but whatever. So, but what can be helpful, right? Like what maybe start to set a schedule, right? Set a limit. I do want to assign value to just like staring at the TV. There is value in that, right? There's value in resting. But once you overdo it, you're wasting your life. That's the point. That's it, right? What like 1 hour of Netflix, an hour and a half of Netflix, fine if it's a movie, 2 hours of Netflix, and that includes the time that you're browsing through Netflix, so 2 hours max, you know. But like after that, the third hour, the fourth hour, like ain't nobody got time for that, right? Like there's a point when the time runs out in life, right? So the two things that you can do is, one, build a schedule and follow the schedule, and be very careful about sleeping late. Please be careful about sleeping late. Like it messes everything up, right? Like just schedule your sleep and schedule your waking time. The other thing is, so once you do that, I think that's going to help, right? Coupled with that is look at the trajectory of time that you're in now. If I continue on this path, where am I going to, like what I was saying before, what am I going to look like in a month? What will I have gained, right? Am I okay with that? If you are, fine. If you're not, then do something about it, right? And pray, right? Pray. And just like ask God to, for me personally, like I'm just saying a personal thing for me. Like one of my very consistent prayers is that, please God, don't let me waste an opportunity, or don't let me miss something that you're trying to tell me, no matter what's going on. Like I don't want to, this situation that I'm in, any situation, not just coronavirus, might really suck. But God, if you're trying to give me something or tell me something, please don't let me miss it. because sometimes I could be so like laser focused on a specific outcome or something else, but I don't want to miss what God is trying to give me in a situation. Because you know what, guys? Sometimes you only get a situation or a circumstance once. You only get one chance to be a parent. You get one chance to be a spouse. Usually one chance to start building your career, right? So many, and and I'm not trying to say that God can't help you even if you mess those one chances up, but we also have to balance that with the reality of, like, it's very hard to tell a parent who's been screwing up their parenthood for 16 years to fix it, right? It's hard to fix it, right? So they only get one chance for those 16 years, right? So you don't, in every moment of our lives, including right now, I need to be saying, God, this time is right now. I don't want to miss something you're trying to give me. Again, I'm just saying my opinion. I can't motivate you, and God gives the increase. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the balance here that we're seeing both from Christine and Makar is on the one hand, like there's the impetus of, behold, now is the day of salvation. Like today, right? We live in this eternal now where God wants us to repent and to move right now. Like it's not always 6 months from now, right? We balance that with the idea of course, there is redemption. Of course, God can recreate things all the time. And of course, God can, no matter how many times you screw things up in the past, like God can renew and God can restore. Um, but maybe we don't always have to default to just the restoration. Maybe we can also try to allow God to give us a chance to do it right the first time too. There's no harm in that. No harm in getting it right the first time. Shifting gears a little bit to one question here, because we've spoken a lot about things that we can do individually, things that we can do as a family. But I think as church folk, we understand that the world doesn't just revolve around us, not just me and you, right? What about, one person's asking, the people who are vulnerable around us, in terms of, like, at church, for example, the elderly, right? Or those who are, lonely, or in New York City, the people who, I was speaking with someone earlier who works for an organization for individuals experiencing homelessness, right? The people that we pass by on our way to the subway, the people that Christ talks to us in Matthew 25 and says, like, I was hungry, I was naked, I was thirsty, I was in prison, and you came and you saw me and you visited me and you experienced Christ in that way. What about those people in this whole situation, in this whole Corona, apocalypse here? Is there a way that we can be there for them? Is there a way that we can do something? Is there anything that you would suggest? In a socially distant and healthy awareness kind of way?
I've heard of some churches that are using teens to give groceries to the elderly. So they're going to go visit the elderly and bring them groceries and do it from a social distancing perspective, leave it at their doorstep or something like that. So I'm sure there are organizations that are connected that way through our churches. I know through New Jersey here that's some of the churches are doing that. So whatever ways that we can help that way while not breaking the social distancing, physical distancing aspects of this, and connecting who we can to resources, but just mainly, even if we can just give somebody a call or a FaceTime or something like that so they don't feel alone, that's making some progress at the very least. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like, if you're able to donate to any organization that's helping do that, if you're able to, if you have any sort of, like, professional training or expertise that is useful during this time, and you're able to volunteer that, do it. Definitely, I mean, one of the best things you can do is to reach out to people, just a phone call, a text, a FaceTime, whatever, and go out of your comfort zone in terms of, like, I've never FaceTimed this person before. What do I do, right? Like, and sometimes, so don't even worry about that. Believe me, like, just do it and see what happens, and don't even worry about, like, that. There's people that I've never FaceTimed with, but I've spoken over the phone with all the time. Like, I speak with on the phone, but now all of a sudden we're all stuck. We can't even see each other if we wanted to. Some people I only speak with in person, right? So we have to adjust, right? These things, but connecting in a meaningful way is very important with people. That's extremely important. And of course, I think one of the highest thing you can do is to pray. And I'm not saying that because it's cliche or because that's, like, what you have to say, even though it is what you have to say. But, like, just pray. Like, you have to pray, because number one, prayer is not, like, for changing God. prayer is for changing you, right? Like when I pray, I put myself further and further into harmony with God. Like my heart changes when I pray, right? And you'll find that as you pray for people, all of a sudden your heart softens towards them, right? Your heart is softening towards them, and you're able to be there for them. Because when you talk to someone that you've prayed for, that's like the most amazing thing, right? Like when you're talking to someone and before, like a few days before you prayed for that person, like that's a big deal, right? So you have to pray because we need grace from God for God to give us so many strengths and gifts and talents and energy and motivation to provide care in creative ways, in new ways. By the way, the church during this time has really like, I mean, talk about resilience, right? The Coptic Church is like resilient, bro, right? I mean, look at this. Like I have so many Zoom meetings all the time. Like there are 600 tasbihas I could be attending right now, right? And so like, and from all over the world and from more monasteries than there are monasteries, like there is everything going on, right? So you will also be part of that creativity, right? And so we want to like join into all that, and so be part of that and pray and reach out to people and volunteer your skill.
I love it. And speaking of volunteering your skill, we're probably going to close with this one question, and then we'll have some closing thoughts from you guys. But I might just take this one just for the sake of time. It says here that if you're on the front lines, how do you balance desire to help and be Christ-like with the fear of exposure, especially if you don't have the right PPE and that kind of stuff? The reason I want to just bang this one out for the sake of time is I think one thing that we can say is the way we understand kind of the role of a healthcare worker, you know, in the Orthodox Church, right, is that it's a sacred role. It's the presence of Christ. And there is something there that you really be able to have communion with the person that you are seeking in their suffering, right? Having said that, for you to have the desire and like the necessity to hold your organization accountable, like I signed a petition recently in one hospital to say that if I'm going to go on the front lines of battle, I need to be able to have the proper gear, right? We don't send soldiers into war with no guns and no helmets and that kind of stuff. So I think what we would say, I mean, there hasn't been like a definitive like church position on this kind of stuff, but I think what we as Mena are generally advising, we've had, you know, one person who's not on the call here, but is sort of one of our heroes of medical missions, George Tedros. In the time of Liberia, you know, he went and volunteered himself to like serve the people in Africa who were battling, not Liberia, Ebola rather, went to Liberia to battle Ebola, but he went prepared, right? So for us to take precautions and to be prepared and to make sure that we're not subjecting people that we love or putting them at risk as well is a wise thing to do, right? And that wisdom is not contrary to our courage. Like there's no difference between or it's not opposing each other. They have the courage and the responsibility and like the sense of ownership of saying, I need to be present for people, balanced with saying, I need to have the right resources of protection. And if you're in a position where that's not the case and you don't feel protected, I can feel comfortable telling you this, is that even for organizations in New York and New Jersey, it's important for you to be able to speak out, be able to say this, I need to be able to be protected in order to serve people. That's why there's all these protests that are happening and then you see them on the news. And I think for us as an organization, I don't speak for the organization, but it's important for us to support the healthcare workers who are in that position. One way, like Makar is saying, we really support by prayer. Secondly, like that's why we have this hotline. And, you know, we're offering for anyone on the front lines or anyone who's kind of struggling with this, we have our team of doctors, the medical experts who can kind of walk you through some of these questions. Maybe you don't have the proper PPE, but if you call the hotline, someone can sort of direct you towards, oh, here's where we can help you and get some N95s, you know, headed your way. Because it's not just supporting you by saying, tough, you know, here's a little pat on the back, Habibi, it's going to be okay. And then you risk your life, right? We have a more kind of wise and balanced perspective on that. So I hope that sheds some light in terms of like our Orthodox perspective on both the duty to serve and the duty to be present for our patients, at the same time taking precautions to protect ourselves and protect our loved ones, those two are not at odds at all. We don't believe in kind of reckless martyrdom, if you will, that we don't just kind of go and say, for the sake of just putting ourselves in danger. That's not wise. So wanted to close by just thanking Makar and Christine so much for their time, and thank you guys for these really wonderful questions. This has been really eye-opening for me and really encouraging. I want to give you a chance to maybe just give us a closing thought on our way out. If you can each kind of share with us kind of one pearl of wisdom there as we close for the night. And I just wanted to really, really take the chance to appreciate it and thank you for your precious time. We can start with Christine, maybe if you want to share with us a closing thought.
Yeah, just take it easy on yourselves during this time. Again, everybody's trying to adjust and trying to adapt. Know that you can be resilient. Know that this moment isn't a moment that's going to be permanent, but that we can learn through every situation that we're in, and that we can be resilient, and we can look back at this and see that we came through it both mentally and physically, hopefully unharmed, but that we can be resilient, and just to have some perspective that it isn't insurmountable. We have God on our side. We have a great community, and we have to connect to them through this difficulty, and that's what will help us to be resilient.
Amen.
Yeah, and we love you so much. Thank you for joining. And your joining is actually a way of you caring for yourself, right? And that's really important. So you should be I am encouraged by the fact that you are taking a step like this and filling your time with something good, something constructive, seeking help if you need it, asking questions. And so definitely continue to do that. Please don't let anything bad happen to you, because there are resources that are available to you. If you think that no one cares, that is the biggest lie ever in life, right? Because God cares, and there are hundreds of people who care. And so please don't ever accept that lie that nobody cares. And there's help for every single person, no exceptions. So and then also please continue to pray for each other and for all the people who are providing care, right? And sometimes when you pray for people, it lifts your spirit too. So so yeah, and pray for us. Thanks.
I love it. Amen. Thank you guys so much. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Thank you all for your time and for your prayers and your presence. And remember, like Makar is saying, we care about you, and Mena cares about you. There are all these resources that we're offering for you as Mena Mental Health is there to be present during this time. This is a tough time, and that's why we want to be particularly present for you through email, website, phone. We're here when you need us. So thank you so much again, and tune in hopefully next time. We'll do this again. All right. Have a good night.